right to that man, bro. I just had to cool off, right? Just get my mind right, man, you know. But I really gotta get this off my shit, man.
Despite the flurry of activity in the VIP section, Kirk Frost and Young Jock were not acting like their usual flashy, enthusiastic selves. They both looked like royalty, looking out over the crowd from their corner booth, but something wasn't quite right. They weren't talking or laughing. Jokes or indulging in idle drinking like the other notable visitors. Both of them were holding glasses, but they were not drinking. They were constantly moving and scanning the dance floor. While Jock leaned in to mumble something, Kirk just responded briefly. Nod, his attention unblinking. The majority of club patrons thought they were cool and collected, yet their body language gave the opposite impression. While everyone else was cheering, dancing, and taking photographs, Kirk and Jock were not there to celebrate their win. Supplied them with the best perspective, and they were using it. It seemed as if they were waiting. Then he arrived. Unaware that danger was approaching, Lil Scrappy entered the room with his trademark swagger, grinning widely and enthusiastically as only he could. Immediately, people gathered around him. I applaud Dapp's embraces. His specialty was what he was doing. Taking selfies while clinking drinks and laughing when Scrappy was on 10, the crowd was enthralled by his magnetism. The whole atmosphere altered when he stepped inside. It's just, when Scrappy shows up, what happens? He becomes the main attraction. But while most were drawn in by the pleasure, a few astute eyes caught something more. Across the floor, in the dim light of that dimly illuminated VIP section, Kirk's and Jock's eyes stayed on Scrappy. Every action, it seemed, all oak to the average partygoer. For those listening, though, the tension in the air was starting to crackle. One of the dancers by the bar suddenly halted and turned to face Scrappy's group. Two guards moved stealthily. The DJ himself, he stopped in the middle of the transition, his beat dipping a little as if he sensed something was shifting, for every spotlight cast a shadow, and Scrappy was walking right into his area. The environment cooled once inside the booth. Once again, Kirk leaned forward and said quietly. Stern-toned Jock turned slowly to Scrappy after nodding and checking his phone. There were no smiles or jokes, only a heady, still stare. Jock nudges Scrappy modestly, and Kirk narrows his eyes and follows. They didn't blink. A waitress arrived with another round, but for some reason, the energy stopped her cold. Her hands were trembling a little as she set the bottle down carefully, said nothing, and walked away. And she sensed it. The camera phones weren't out yet, but the real ones in the room felt something was happening. As if they were animals waiting for their prey, the people surrounding the booth started to notice how still Kirk and Jock had gotten. Scrappy was still seen joking with his guys in the interim. But one of his lads murmured in a whisper in his ear, leaning closer. Tenacious, he paused and looked back, maintaining eye contact with Kirk and Jock long enough for everyone to see the shift. They were no longer just watching. They were ready now that the wait was gone.
Man, I'm frustrated, irritated, man.
Shortly thereafter, the quiet was broken. When Kirk and Young Jock finally left their VIP position, they began to move through the crowd. The atmosphere around them instantly altered. People took notice of their purposeful, determined gestures, even though they weren't yet shouting. The conversation ended. Scrappy was still having fun and enjoying himself with his company near the center of the dance floor when he saw the movement and spotted them coming. No one asked, and the crowd dispersed. As they came closer, he tried to keep his arms out in a neutral position and turned to face them. "What's up?" His tone was calm but cautious as he asked. He spoke with interest and maybe a warning. But when they came in, neither Kirk nor Jock had a smile on their faces. No dap, no love. Their separation narrowed until they were nearly shoulder to shoulder, which was uncomfortable. The music was still booming, but it seemed to be struggling with the massive energy that pulsed between them. Then the shift started. The delicate tension abruptly became abrasive. At first, Jock leaned in and spoke in a low, sharp voice. He didn't break his eye, Scrap, but we heard you've been talking a little too carelessly recently. Make contact. Evidently caught off guard, Scrappy's eyebrows changed. When addressing what he had requested, Kirk pretended to be rather confused, but he didn't wait for answers. He immediately dove in, "You understand what we mean. Playing both sides while grinning in our faces, then using your mouth while we're not around." Kirk then produced his phone as evidence in court, displaying ready-made receipts on the screen. That's when the real seriousness of the issue subsided. You think that we won't get this back. We were given the receipts. Jock jumped right in again. You were at that studio last week. Talking wildly, do you think people are loyal to you? They gave us everything. Scrappy glanced at the phone for a moment, then went back to Kirk. You guys are putting things out of context, and that's not even the whole conversation. You're trying to misrepresent what I said. His voice rose slightly in response, but Kirk held his ground. Whatever the situation, you spoke it. The tension changed now that the supposed proof was in hand. It had become personal. Words were no longer sufficient. The atmosphere thickened by the moment, and Scrappy's face flushed. His normally composed manner wavered. You guys act like I'm some snake, yet I've told you both the truth more times than I can remember. You know that I'm terrified of receipts. Half of you are still false, and none of you are loyal anymore. As the volume was raised, everything changed. People who had not previously paid attention to the phone now became aware of it. Started to record, the DJ adjusted the music a little after seeing the shift. Security at the edge of the dance floor began to creep closer to maintain vigilance. Scrappy prodded Kirk's cell phone with a finger. You want to show people that you should back up what you said and how you were lying about me when I wasn't there. The blow to the gut was severe. Kirk halted Jock's natural advance with a hard hand and said, but Scrappy showed no signs of cooling off. They were surrounded by the crowd. It's close, but not too tight. Everybody in the room was familiar with that club. It was no longer simply about words. There, beneath the pulsating lights, were stakes of pride, respect, and trust. The final spark that would set everything on fire was only a few seconds away, and tension was high in the air.
Nobody, if y'all ain't with me, I don't have nobody. And all that talking, cuz I need y'all to show me, cuz.
Although the VIP area was bustling, Kirk Frost and young Jock weren't acting like their usual colorful, energetic selves. There was a problem. Both were dressed to kill and stood like kings in their corner booth, watching the crowd. Joking, having fun, or simply sipping their drinks like the other VIPs. Despite holding glasses, neither of them was actually drinking. They were constantly scanning the dance floor with their eyes. Speaking, Jock leaned down to talk under his. Kirk took a deep breath and gave a small nod, his focus unwavering. The majority of club patrons believed them to be calm, collected, and cool, while their body language gave the opposite impression. There was a lot of activity in the rest of the room, including dancing, shouting, and taking selfies. However, Jock and Kirk did not go to honor. They were using the wonderful vantage position that their booth offered. They seemed like they were waiting to strike, and then he appeared. Lil Scrappy entered with his typical swagger, unaware that catastrophe was imminent. He was grinning widely, his enthusiasm lighting up the space as only he could. People immediately flocked to him. To dabs, embraces, cheers, he was doing what he did best. Taking pictures, clinking glasses, and laughing aloud, the crowd appreciated Scrappy's enthusiasm while he was on 10. The whole atmosphere shifted. The moment he assumed control, that's exactly what happens when Scrappy shows up there. He assumes the lead. But while most were engrossed in the pleasure, some keen watchers saw something else. Kirk and Jock stood motionless across the floor in the dim light of the VIP room, locked. Everybody's attention was on Scrappy's moves. The average partygoer thought everything was oak. But for those listening, the tension was starting to crackle in the air. A dancer by the bar abruptly halted and turned to face Scrappy's group. To security. The guards moved silently. Even the DJ halted during the switch, lowering his tempo slightly as if he felt something was shifting. For every spotlight cast a shadow, and Scrappy was stepping straight into his limelight. The mood turned cold once they were back in the booth. Kirk leaned. This time, Jock spoke in a gruff, low voice, nodded, checked his phone, and then slowly looked around the room again. There were no smiles or laughs, only a heavy, quiet stare at Scrappy. Jock gave Scrappy a subtle nod, and Kirk narrowed his eyes in response. They didn't blink after that. The waitress stopped cold when she delivered another round because of the enthusiasm. She set the bottle down carefully, her hands trembling a little, and then she walked away without saying anything. She sensed it too. The actual camera phones in the room knew something was going to happen even though they were still in the development stage. People in the vicinity started to notice how still Kirk and Jock had become, like predators awaiting the perfect prey. Meanwhile, Scrappy was still spotted cracking jokes with his team. But then one of his boys leaned closer, and he heard a whisper in his ear. Scrappy halted and looked over his shoulder. maintaining eye contact with Kirk and Jock for however long it took for everyone to notice the shift. The wait was over. They were no longer merely watching. They were ready.
Look at me. Here we go. Look at me. Man, I'm frustrated, irritated, man.